Have you ever won an argument just because the other person couldn't prove you were wrong? It's a really common and honestly a pretty sneaky tactic. Today, we're going to break down how this little flaw in our thinking works, how it takes what we don't know and turns it into a weapon. So it really all boils down to this one question. If you can't find any evidence to disprove a claim, does that somehow make it true? In other words, can a lack of proof ever actually become proof itself? Here's the classic example, right? Ghosts must be real because no one's ever proven they're not. You see what's happening? The argument cleverly flips the whole script. It takes our inability to disprove something and just spins it into positive evidence for it. It's a logical puzzle that's way more common than you think, and we're going to unravel it right now. And this isn't just some quirky idea about spooky stuff. This way of thinking actually has a specific name and a structure that, trust me, shows up again and again in our everyday lives. That whole ghost argument, it isn't just a different point of view. It's what's known as a powerful logical fallacy, basically a mental shortcut that can lead us to some seriously wrong conclusions. All right, so this specific type of flawed reasoning, it has a name, the appeal to ignorance. Okay, so this is the absolute core of the trap. The entire argument hinges on a gap in our knowledge. It's just a way of saying, well, since we don't know for sure, I must be right. It literally weaponizes ignorance and tries to pass it off as evidence. So how does this thing actually work? Well, it usually has three key parts. First, the whole argument is built on nothing, an absence of information. Second, it cleverly shifts the burden of proof. It says you have to disprove the claim instead of the person making the claim having to prove it. And third, it mixes up what is currently unknown with what might be unknowable forever. And look, this isn't just some abstract mental exercise. This fallacy shows up everywhere, from healthcare ads to the courtroom, and it has some serious real-world consequences. Let's start with healthcare. You might see an ad saying a new supplement is great because, hey, there are no studies that prove it's ineffective. But in reality, for us to say something actually works, we need positive proof that it does something, not just a lack of proof that it doesn't. Now, in the courtroom, this is where things get really interesting. A lawyer might argue that a lack of evidence proves their client is innocent, but there's a super important distinction here. Our legal system is built on innocent until proven guilty, which is a standard we need for conviction. But from a purely logical point of view, a lack of evidence doesn't prove innocence. It just means guilt couldn't be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And of course, conspiracy theories. Oh, they absolutely thrive on this logic. The idea that because a government won't comment on UFOs, it must be proof of a cover-up, that is a textbook appeal to ignorance. It transforms a simple lack of information into evidence of some huge secret plot. And believe me, this kind of flawed reasoning is not a new problem. When we look back through history, we find this exact fallacy has fueled some of the most dangerous and unjust moments in our past. I mean, just look at this timeline, it's pretty chilling. During the Salem Witch Trials, the accused were forced to prove they weren't witches, which is impossible. Then, fast forward to the 1950s during McCarthyism, the failure to prove a negative, that you had no communist ties, was basically treated as proof of guilt. And for centuries, the medical practice of bloodletting just kept going, not because there was any evidence it worked, but simply because there was no evidence that it was harmful. So, now that we've seen the problem and just how bad the consequences can be, how do we actually spot this thing and defend ourselves against it? Let's build your evidence-based toolkit. Okay, here's what you can do. First, always demand positive evidence for a claim someone is making. Ask yourself, wait a minute, who really has the burden of proof here? And learn to recognize that unproven does not mean untrue. Most importantly, if an argument is built entirely on a lack of information, that should be a major red flag. If you walk away with just one thing, let it be this. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we don't have proof for something, that doesn't automatically mean it's false. But, and this is just as important, it doesn't mean it's true either. It just means we don't know yet. And that brings us to a final thought. It's pretty easy to spot this fallacy in other people's arguments. It's a lot harder to see it in ourselves. So as you go about your day, maybe just ask yourself, where might this little fallacy be hiding in my own beliefs? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.